It was a cold, clear morning when I woke up to the sound of my phone vibrating beside me on the nightstand. I had anticipated the usual flurry of birthday wishes from friends, the obligatory messages that felt more like a social duty than heartfelt sentiments. But this year, I was hopeful. After all, I was 26 now, practically an adult, or so I thought. I had worked hard the past few years to build my career, pushing through sleepless nights, constant deadlines, and the deep-rooted feeling that I would never be enough in my parents' eyes. But today, this day, I thought I'd finally get a moment of acknowledgement, a moment of appreciation for all I had done, for all I had achieved without their help. I glanced at the calendar. My birthday was no longer just a personal milestone. It had become a quiet, unspoken test. Would my parents finally recognize me, or would they overlook me again, as they had for the last 26 years? I didn't have the energy to think too much about it, but the tiniest flicker of hope still lingered. The day went on as normal. Work, messages, the usual run of things. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. By evening, I was back home, a small studio apartment I had rented on my own in the city, far away from my childhood home. I wanted this year to be different. I wanted to take control of my life and my happiness. No more waiting for others to celebrate me. I put on a smile and decided to treat myself, a small victory after everything I had achieved on my own. But the true test would come when I walked into that dinner, when my parents would finally arrive and I would see the gift they had picked out for me. I hadn't seen them in months, not since that one awkward family gathering last Christmas when my sister had been the shining star of attention and I was merely a background presence, quiet, unnoticed, forgotten. The idea of having them over for dinner was my way of inviting them into my world, a world where I made the decisions, where I was the one who mattered. I stood in front of the mirror, looking at myself. 26. A decade of growing up and dealing with the subtle but ever-present sting of being second best in my own family. My sister, always the priority. Always the golden child. She had always been the one to get the extra praise, the extra attention, the extra love. And I was always just there. When I had excelled in school, getting scholarships and recognition, my parents had barely noticed. When I moved out on my own, created a life for myself, built my career brick by brick, they saw it no more than something to be expected. They never threw me a celebration. No congratulations, nothing. But my sister, every minor achievement was met with applause, fanfare, and a lavish gift. I was tired of always being the one who did everything right, but never received any acknowledgement. My parents' love always had conditions, always reserved for the one who demanded it, the one who made their life complicated. And that was her, my younger sister. It wasn't that I didn't love her, I did. But in comparison, she was a walking storm, unpredictable, defiant, and always the one who seemed to get what she wanted. Meanwhile, I had quietly done everything I was supposed to do, but no one noticed. At the dinner table, the food was prepared and set, the candles flickered in the soft, dim light, and the air felt like it was thick with expectation. But I didn't feel excitement. I felt dread. I had convinced myself it was going to be different, but I wasn't sure I could pretend anymore that this was normal. They arrived on time, as always. My mother, her hair slightly graying but perfectly styled, her eyes still sharp and calculating, stepped into my apartment first, her gaze scanning the place with a level of judgment I had grown accustomed to. My father, less expressive but just as critical, followed suit, and then, of course, my sister, Lena, the golden child. Her hair was perfectly styled, her smile wide and fake as always. She was dressed in something trendy, effortlessly chic, the kind of girl who could make an entrance without ever trying. She flopped onto the couch without a care in the world. I could feel my heart race, the blood pounding in my ears, the faint tremor of anger bubbling up in my chest. I watched them, waiting for the moment when the present would be revealed. I had told myself I wasn't expecting anything extravagant, but I would be lying if I hadn't thought about it. Just once, I wanted something to show that they saw me, that they appreciated me. And yet, when the time came, my father handed me a card, a cheap, flimsy thing with a generic, hastily written message. "Happy birthday, kiddo." It was nothing more than a Hallmark afterthought. My mother smiled at me, but I could see the forced nature of it, as though she wasn't entirely sure what this dinner was about or why she was even there. My sister didn't even seem to notice the card in my hand. She was busy scrolling through her phone, probably posting a picture of her latest shopping spree. I forced a smile, trying to maintain some semblance of composure. But inside, something snapped. I looked at the card, then at the expensive bags and gifts my sister had received, her eyes wide with excitement, her voice constantly bubbling with enthusiasm as she talked about her new purchases. I tried to hold back my tears, but they were already there, threatening to spill over. How many years had I spent being the dutiful, obedient daughter, and for what? I wasn't the one who demanded attention. I wasn't the one who made a scene. I had always done everything right, just as I was expected to. And yet here I was, holding a $2 card in my hand, while my sister reveled in the spotlight. The sting of years of overlooked sacrifices hit me at once. The injustice burned like acid in my throat. In that moment, I realized I had been invisible in their eyes for too long. I was done playing the background role. I was done waiting for their approval, their acknowledgement. I was done being overlooked. They had no idea what they had just set in motion. The anger inside me began to bubble up, and for the first time in my life, I felt something I hadn't in years: power. I wasn't just a passive observer anymore. I was going to make them see me. I was going to make them regret every moment they had spent treating me as though I didn't matter. This wasn't just about the card. This was about everything. About every time I had been pushed aside, about every time they chose her over me. I had reached my breaking point, and now it was time for payback. But the best part, they would never see it coming.
As I sat there, the card still clenched tightly in my hand, I couldn't help but replay the memories, the ones I had tried so hard to bury beneath my steady surface. It wasn't just about the card. It wasn't even about the birthday. It was the years of living in the shadow of someone else's greatness, of always being overshadowed by my younger sister, Lena. From the very beginning, I was the reliable one, the one who didn't need constant attention, the one who could be counted on to behave and follow the rules. I excelled in school, always top of the class, always the perfect student. But it didn't matter. No one seemed to notice. My parents were always too busy worrying about Lena, her rebellious streak, her tendency to push boundaries, her constant need for validation. They doted on her as if her very existence was a series of problems to solve. She never needed to try, yet somehow she always got what she wanted. I was invisible, an afterthought in my own home. I was the one who went unnoticed, the one whose success went unacknowledged. And as I sat there, staring at that card, I realized just how much of my life had been spent striving for something, anything, that would make them proud. But it never happened. When I was younger, I didn't understand. I thought it was just a phase, that eventually they would see me for who I was. But as the years went by, I began to realize something more painful. My parents didn't see me at all. It was always about Lena. Always about her and her messy, unpredictable life. They adored her chaos because it gave them something to fix, something to talk about, something to focus on. But me? I was the quiet one, the one who didn't cause trouble, who didn't need to be rescued. I was just there. When I graduated high school, my sister was a mess. She had barely scraped through her finals and was already stirring up trouble with her friends. She was the one who needed constant supervision, constant intervention.
and yet somehow she was the center of attention at every family event. When I had graduated, I received a fleeting smile from my father and a "good job, kid" from my mother, but no celebration, no praise, no acknowledgement. It was as though I hadn't done anything significant at all. They never bothered to attend my graduation. They said they were too busy with work, but I knew the truth. My sister's drama had consumed them. When I was accepted into a prestigious university on a full scholarship, it was a silent victory. I remember the day I received the letter, a mixture of joy and sadness filling me. My parents were barely interested. They congratulated me, but it was clear that their real focus was on Lena, on whether she would graduate high school and whether she would be accepted into a community college. It was always about her. I poured myself into my studies, worked part-time jobs to support myself, and slowly began to build a life for myself. And when I graduated with honors, there was no big celebration, no applause, just the same indifferent smiles from my parents and a feeling of emptiness that I couldn't shake. Meanwhile, Lena was a constant whirlwind of drama. She dropped out of college multiple times, moved in and out of boyfriends' apartments, got arrested a few times, and still managed to make herself the center of attention at every family event. When she screwed up, my parents rushed to her aid. They paid her rent, bought her clothes, bailed her out of jail. But me? I was expected to handle everything on my own. I wasn't the child they worried about. I wasn't the one they had to fix. I was just there. When I graduated high school, my sister was a mess. She had barely scraped through her finals and was already stirring up trouble with her friends. She was the one who needed constant supervision, constant intervention. And yet, somehow, she was the center of attention at every family event. When I had graduated, I received a fleeting smile from my father and a "good job, kid" from my mother, but no celebration, no praise, no acknowledgement. It was as though I hadn't done anything significant at all. They never bothered to attend my graduation. They said they were too busy with work, but I knew the truth. My sister's drama had consumed them. When I was accepted into a prestigious university on a full scholarship, it was a silent victory. I remember the day I received the letter, a mixture of joy and sadness filling me. My parents were barely interested. They congratulated me, but it was clear that their real focus was on Lena, on whether she would graduate high school and whether she would be accepted into a community college. It was always about her. I poured myself into my studies, worked part-time jobs to support myself, and slowly began to build a life for myself. And when I graduated with honors, there was no big celebration, no applause, just the same indifferent smiles from my parents and a feeling of emptiness that I couldn't shake. Meanwhile, Lena was a constant whirlwind of drama. She dropped out of college multiple times, moved in and out of boyfriends' apartments, got arrested a few times, and still managed to make herself the center of attention at every family event. When she screwed up, my parents rushed to her aid. They paid her rent, bought her clothes, bailed her out of jail. But me? I was expected to handle everything on my own. I wasn't the child they worried about. I wasn't the one that had to fix. I was just there. When I graduated high school, my sister was a mess. She had barely scraped through her finals and was already stirring up trouble with her friends. She was the one who needed constant supervision, constant intervention. And yet somehow she was the center of attention at every family event. When I had graduated, I received a fleeting smile from my father and a "good job, kid" from my mother, but no celebration, no praise, no acknowledgement. It was as though I hadn't done anything significant at all. They never bothered to attend my graduation. They said they were too busy with work, but I knew the truth. My sister's drama had consumed them. When I was accepted into a prestigious university on a full scholarship, it was a silent victory. I remember the day I received the letter, a mixture of joy and sadness filling me. My parents were barely interested. They congratulated me, but it was clear that their real focus was on Lena, on whether she would graduate high school and whether she would be accepted into a community college. It was always about her.
I poured myself into my studies, worked part-time jobs to support myself, and slowly began to build a life for myself. And when I graduated with honors, there was no big celebration, no applause, just the same indifferent smiles from my parents and a feeling of emptiness that I couldn't shake. Meanwhile, Lena was a constant whirlwind of drama. She dropped out of college multiple times, moved in and out of boyfriends' apartments, got arrested a few times, and still managed to make herself the center of attention at every family event. When she screwed up, my parents rushed to her aid. They paid her rent, bought her clothes, bailed her out of jail. But me? I was expected to handle everything on my own. I wasn't the child they worried about. I wasn't the one they had to fix. I was just there. When I graduated high school, my sister was a mess. She had barely scraped through her finals and was already stirring up trouble with her friends. She was the one who needed constant supervision, constant intervention. And yet, somehow, she was the center of attention at every family event. When I had graduated, I received a fleeting smile from my father and a "good job, kid" from my mother. But no celebration, no praise, no acknowledgement. It was as though I hadn't done anything significant at all. They never bothered to attend my graduation. They said they were too busy with work, but I knew the truth. My sister's drama had consumed them. When I was accepted into a prestigious university on a full scholarship, it was a silent victory. I remember the day I received the letter, a mixture of joy and sadness filling me. My parents were barely interested. They congratulated me, but it was clear that their real focus was on Lena, on whether she would graduate high school and whether she would be accepted into a community college. It was always about her. I poured myself into my studies, worked part-time jobs to support myself, and slowly began to build a life for myself. And when I graduated with honors, there was no big celebration, no applause, just the same indifferent smiles from my parents and a feeling of emptiness that I couldn't shake. Meanwhile, Lena was a constant whirlwind of drama. She dropped out of college multiple times, moved in and out of boyfriends' apartments, got arrested a few times, and still managed to make herself the center of attention at every family event. When she screwed up, my parents rushed to her aid. They paid her rent, bought her clothes, bailed her out of jail. But me? I was expected to handle everything on my own. I wasn't the child they worried about. I wasn't the one they had to fix. I was just there. When I graduated high school, my sister was a mess. She had barely scraped through her finals and was already stirring up trouble with her friends. She was the one who needed constant supervision, constant intervention, and yet somehow she was the center of attention at every family event. When I had graduated, I received a fleeting smile from my father and a "good job, kid" from my mother, but no celebration, no praise, no acknowledgement. It was as though I hadn't done anything significant at all. They never bothered to attend my graduation. They said they were too busy with work, but I knew the truth. My sister's drama had consumed them. When I was accepted into a prestigious university on a
I spent the next few days in a haze of furious determination, my mind working tirelessly to map out the intricate web of payback that I knew I had to weave. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was focused. I was done being the person who simply accepted the hand she was dealt, the daughter who did everything right but was always ignored, always overlooked, always second. My parents had pushed me to the breaking point, and I wasn't going to let this moment slip by. It was time for them to see who I really was. But it wasn't going to be about shouting or getting into petty fights. No, I was smarter than that. I was going to build something so grand, so undeniable, that they would have no choice but to see me, to see what they had lost by neglecting me all these years. Revenge, I realized, wasn't just about making them feel bad. It was about making them regret every choice that had ever led them to this point. And the best way to do that was through success. Success that they could never ignore. The first step was to decide what I could do that would really make them feel the sting. My career was already well on its way, but it needed something more, a bold move, a statement of intent. I had been considering buying property for months. I had saved up, invested in stocks, and built a modest nest egg. But it was time to make a real move. I would buy a house. Not just any house. A house that screamed success, that made a statement. It had to be grand, but not tacky, elegant, but unexpected. I needed them to feel that rush of confusion and jealousy when they saw me step into a world they could never quite reach. It wasn't enough to have a career they didn't acknowledge. It wasn't enough to have accomplishments they refused to see. I needed to show them that I could build an empire of my own, a life they could never touch. But the house wasn't just about them, it was about me too. It was about finally owning something, taking control of my life in a way I had never been allowed to. I knew that once I made this move, there would be no turning back. The house would be the first part of the plan, the cornerstone of my revenge. But the real weapon was what I had built beneath the surface. I had been quietly working on a business idea for months. It had started as a simple passion project, a way to express my creativity and show that I could do something different from the career path my parents had envisioned for me. But as I refined it, the idea grew into something bigger, something more substantial. I had researched the market, networked with the right people, and developed a solid business plan. I had already started to make some small steps, but now it was time to go all in. I had spent years working for others, building their dreams. Now it was time to build my own. The business I was starting wasn't just about making money. It was about asserting control, about creating something that would allow me to finally step out of their shadow. It was the perfect plan. 2 moves that would not only secure my financial independence, but also show my parents that I was no longer the invisible daughter. They would never understand it at first. They would probably dismiss it, as they always did. They would assume it was a passing phase or something that would fizzle out. But they wouldn't be able to ignore it for long. When the house was ready, when the business started taking off, they would be forced to reckon with my success. They would be forced to see me. I couldn't afford to make any mistakes. This plan had to be executed flawlessly, with precision and patience. I couldn't let my emotions get the best of me. Every step had to be carefully thought out, every move deliberate. I knew it wouldn't be easy. There would be setbacks. There would be moments of doubt. But I was done being the person who just accepted things. I had spent my whole life playing it safe, doing the right thing, taking the high road. But this time I was going to take the low road, and I was going to do it with style. I spent weeks laying the groundwork, finalizing the details, securing the financing for the house, and getting the business plan in place. Every day, I worked tirelessly, driven by the single thought that my parents would finally see me. When I bought the house, it was everything I had imagined and more. It was a sprawling, modern space, located in an upscale neighborhood that my parents would never dare to venture into. It had a rooftop terrace with panoramic views of the city, a gourmet kitchen with marble countertops, and an expansive living room with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked a lush garden. It was the kind of house that made a statement, that commanded attention. And it was mine. As soon as I had the keys in hand, I began planning the perfect way to reveal it to my parents. The timing had to be just right. It couldn't be too soon. Too much too quickly would have been obvious, but it couldn't be too late either. I needed them to understand that I wasn't asking for their approval anymore. I wasn't waiting for them to recognize me. I was showing them what they had failed to notice. I would host a dinner, just like the one before, but this time, everything would be different. The house would be the backdrop. I would give them the grand tour, lead them through the rooms, and let them see the life I had built. But I wouldn't say a word. I would let the house speak for itself. And when they were overwhelmed by the grandeur of it all, I would sit them down, tell them exactly how I had done it, and then wait for their reaction. The dinner would be a small affair, just my parents, Lena and me. I knew Lena would be jealous. She wouldn't be able to hide it. She would try to downplay everything, act like it was no big deal, but I would see through it. And that was the best part, watching her squirm, watching her realize that I had surpassed her. It wasn't about the house. It wasn't about the money. It was about control. It was about the power that came with finally being seen. It wasn't just the physical house that would make them take notice. It was the business that would begin to thrive, that would force them to understand that I wasn't just playing around. I was building an empire. As the weeks passed, my business started to take off faster than I had expected. The product was in demand, and I had already started to make some key partnerships that ensured long-term success. The momentum was building, and every step I took made me feel stronger. I could see it now, my parents sitting across from me, staring at me in disbelief as they realized they had underestimated me. They had thought I was the one who would always fall in line, always do the right thing, take the high road, but they were wrong. I wasn't that person anymore. I wasn't just the daughter they could ignore. I was someone they would have to reckon with. I would make them regret every moment they spent taking me for granted. They would see me finally, and they would know that I had done it on my own, without their help, without their validation. It would be the ultimate payback. They would never be able to ignore me again.
The night of the dinner arrived, and as I stood in front of the full-length mirror in my new home, adjusting the neckline of my dress, a sense of calm washed over me. But beneath it was an unmistakable thrill, the kind you feel just before something monumental happens. I had spent months preparing for this moment, meticulously planning every detail to ensure my parents would feel the full impact of my success. This wasn't just about a house or a business. It was about everything I had been silently working toward. Every moment I had spent being overlooked, being dismissed, being ignored. Tonight, that would all change. Tonight, they would finally see me. The house was a masterpiece. I had spared no expense, and every inch of it reflected the hard work, the dedication, and the single-minded pursuit of success that had been denied me for so long. The sprawling rooms, the panoramic views, the grand dining room that overlooked the city, everything about it was a testament to what I had built for myself. I could almost hear their whispers in my mind, the skeptical, disbelieving voices asking how I had done it. But tonight, they wouldn't just ask. Tonight, I would show them. The doorbell rang, and my heart beat faster. My parents arrived first, their expressions a mix of curiosity and skepticism, but they hadn't seen the house, and they didn't know the half of it. My mother, always the first to criticize, raised an eyebrow as she walked through the front door, but she said nothing. My father, stoic as ever, simply nodded at me. The tension in the air was palpable, but I kept my smile in place, guiding them through the rooms, showing them the house they could never afford, the life they had never been able to give me. I watched their faces as we walked from room to room. The initial surprise was evident, but it was tempered with that same air of disbelief, as if they couldn't quite wrap their heads around it. My mother was the first to speak. "It's nice, but it's just so big," she said, her voice lacking the warmth that should have accompanied such a monumental gesture. I suppressed the urge to roll my eyes, instead leading them toward the dining room. We sat down at the long table, the flickering candlelight casting soft shadows on the polished wood. The meal I had prepared was elegant but simple, a reflection of the new life I was building. We ate in silence, the weight of the moment hanging between us. My sister, Lena, arrived a little late, as usual. She walked in, her presence immediately filling the room, her gaze sweeping over the space with feigned indifference, but I could see the jealousy lurking behind her eyes. She couldn't hide it. She could try to act like it didn't bother her, but I knew better. She was always the center of attention in our family, the one who made the most noise, the one who always had the spotlight. But tonight, all of that changed. I had no intention of waiting for them to notice my success. I would make them see it, and I would make sure they knew it was no accident. As we finished dinner, I stood up,
excusing myself for a moment, then returned with a folder in my hands, the business plan for my company tucked inside. I had already seen the looks exchanged between my parents, those glances that spoke volumes. They were trying to mask their surprise, trying to act as though this was all just another one of my phases. They had underestimated me for so long that they couldn't even begin to comprehend the reality in front of them. As I handed them the folder, my father looked at me with something like suspicion in his eyes. "What's this?" he asked, his tone dismissive. "Something you want us to read?" I smiled. "It's the blueprint for my business, Dad, the one I've been working on for the past year." I could see his disbelief in his eyes, the way his jaw tightened as he flipped through the pages. But I wasn't done yet. "I didn't tell you about it because I didn't need your approval," I continued, my voice steady but cutting. "I didn't need you to believe in me. I didn't need you to give me anything. I did this on my own." My mother's face tightened, her eyes flicking from the folder to my face, searching for any sign of weakness, any hint that this was just a momentary illusion. But there was none. I was resolute. This was no passing phase. This was my reality now. As they absorbed the details of my business venture, my sister shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Her eyes flicked nervously from the papers to my parents' faces, watching them for any sign of approval, but all she could muster was a feigned smile. She was used to getting everything handed to her, used to being the one who didn't have to fight for anything. But now she could see that I had taken control. She could see that I was no longer the invisible daughter. "So, what exactly are you doing?" my father asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. "How did you manage all of this?" It wasn't a compliment. It wasn't admiration. It was surprise, plain and simple. "I built it," I said, my voice calm and deliberate, brick by brick, just like I've always done. My mother sat back, her arms crossed, her eyes narrowing. "And you didn't think to tell us, to ask for help?" she asked, her tone more accusatory than concerned. "I didn't need help. I never did." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. For the first time, I saw something shift in their eyes. They could no longer deny the truth. I had done it, on my own, and they had failed to see it. But I wasn't finished yet. And by the way, I continued, my voice cutting through the silence. "This house, the one you've been walking through like it's no big deal, it's mine. It's paid for. It's a symbol of what I've built for myself. It's everything I've worked for." The room went quiet. I could feel Lena's gaze burning into me, but I didn't look at her. She couldn't steal my thunder tonight. This was my moment. My parents sat there, stunned into silence, processing the enormity of what I had just said. They had underestimated me for so long that they couldn't even begin to comprehend the scale of what I had accomplished. The shock was evident in their eyes, but I saw something else too. Regret. Regret that they hadn't supported me. Regret that they had always favored Lena. Regret that they hadn't given me the credit I deserved. I watched as their expressions shifted from disbelief to something resembling guilt. It wasn't enough. I knew it wasn't enough, but it was a start. They would never look at me the same way again, and neither would Lena. That was the best part. The power was shifting, and I was the one in control now. My parents tried to make small talk after that, but it was obvious that the night had changed for them. They were no longer the ones who held the power, the control. I was. I had reclaimed my place at the table, and they knew it. As they left, I could see the confusion in their eyes. They were struggling to reconcile the image of the obedient daughter they had always known with the woman who now stood before them, someone who they could no longer ignore. I didn't need them to understand right away. I didn't need them to apologize. I knew the truth. They had seen me, and they would never forget me again. The days that followed the dinner were filled with a strange mixture of satisfaction and emptiness, as though the weight of everything I had done was both liberating and suffocating at once. My parents' reactions lingered in my mind, their stunned faces, their attempts at rationalizing the impossible. I had finally forced them to see me for who I was, but as the realization of what I had achieved set in, I couldn't help but feel a hollow sense of victory. The house, the business, the success, all of it had been designed to make them understand, but in some way it had also been about proving something to myself. It wasn't just about the payback. It was about taking control of my own life, of defining who I was without their influence. I spent a lot of time alone in the days after the dinner, walking through my home, touching the cool marble countertops, running my fingers over the carefully chosen furniture that spoke of my new life. Everything about it was mine, from the way I had designed each room to the decisions I had made that led to this moment. Yet there was an emptiness in the air that I hadn't expected. Despite the satisfaction of seeing my parents' shocked expressions, there was a part of me that knew I couldn't rely on their acknowledgement for my happiness. I had spent so much time waiting for their approval, seeking validation in their eyes, and now that I had it, I realized that it wasn't enough. I had spent my life trying to meet their expectations, but in doing so, I had lost sight of who I was beyond their gaze. The truth was, I didn't need their approval anymore. I had built something on my own, without their help, without their support, and that was worth more than any words they could offer. Still, the tension remained. I knew my parents were struggling to process everything. They had spent so many years seeing me as the responsible, quiet daughter, the one who didn't cause problems, the one who didn't ask for anything. To them, I had always been predictable. And then there was Lena. She had been the chaos in our family, the one who demanded attention, the one who needed rescuing. But now, as I watched her from a distance, I realized how much she resented me. She could no longer be the center of attention. My success, my independence, everything I had achieved without them, it ate away at her. I could see it in the way she avoided my calls, the way she couldn't look me in the eye when we were in the same room. She had always been the one to demand more, to get the bigger share of the family's affection, but now the table had turned, and it didn't sit well with her. For the first time in my life, I could feel the power shift between us. She was no longer the one who had everything handed to her. And it was about time. But as much as I had wanted to break free from their expectations, I couldn't deny the lingering tension in my relationship with my parents. They tried to reach out, tried to apologize in their own way, but it wasn't the same. They couldn't take back the years of neglect, the years of putting their focus entirely on Lena. Their guilt was obvious, but it wasn't enough to repair the damage that had been done. They had underestimated me for so long, and now they were trying to catch up, trying to understand the woman I had become. But it was too late. They could never see me the way I needed them to. I wasn't just their quiet, obedient daughter anymore. I had become something else. I was a force of my own. And with that realization, I knew that I no longer needed them to validate me. The business continued to grow, and the success that had once felt like a victory over them started to feel like something even more significant. It was a victory over myself. The first few months after the dinner, I spent building the foundation of my business, expanding into new markets, and finding creative ways to ensure its long-term sustainability. I wasn't doing it for my parents anymore. I was doing it for me. It was my legacy, my creation, and I could finally see the path I had forged for myself. My parents began to reach out more frequently, asking how I was doing, trying to reconcile with me. But the more they tried, the more I realized that I couldn't go back. I couldn't go back to being the person they had always expected me to be. I had changed. And the change wasn't just in the success I had achieved, or the way I had finally made them see me. It was in the way I viewed myself. No longer dependent on their validation, I began to understand that true freedom came from within. It wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It was about doing what made me happy, what gave me peace. It was about understanding that I was enough, with or without their approval. The house, the business, it was just the beginning. As I continued to grow, I began to realize that the most important thing was not the revenge itself, but the transformation that had occurred within me. I had been so focused on showing them that I had lost sight of the fact that the real reward was the person I had become. In the end, my parents never fully understood. They never completely grasped the depth of my frustration, the years of emotional neglect that had shaped me, but that was no longer my problem. They had failed to see me for who I was, and in doing so, they had lost me. Not just as their daughter, but as the person I had become. I was no longer defined by their expectations. I was no longer tethered to their judgments. I had built my own life, and in doing so, I had set myself free. As the months passed, the distance between us grew. I didn't harbor a resentment anymore, but I couldn't go back. I had moved on. And that, in itself, was the greatest revenge. I had done it on my own. I had taken control of my life, my destiny. And that was a power no one, not even my parents, could ever take away from me. In the end, my success wasn't about making them regret their choices. It was about showing myself that I was capable of so much more than they had ever imagined. It was about standing on my own 2 feet and realizing that my worth was never tied to their approval. I had finally become the person I was always meant to be. Free, strong, and unapologetically me. And as I sat alone in my new home, watching the sunset from the rooftop terrace, I knew that this was only the beginning. There was so much more I had yet to achieve, so much more I had yet to prove, not to them, but to myself.